Hi Sunday Club! This week I wanted to tell you a story about the trip I took to Thailand when I was in my 20s. Now, Thailand is this country here, just between Cambodia and Myanmar in Southeast Asia. It's a very green and lush and warm country. It's got lots of beautiful sandy beaches down in the south, and many people like to go there on holiday. But there's a lot more to Thailand than beach holidays. When I went with an organisation called Tear Fund that works in all over the world really to show Jesus' love in practical ways. So it's called a development charity, and it helps normally communities that have got issues with poverty or some form of injustice to try and help improve their lives. And Christians in those countries tend to work on these projects alongside other members of the local community. Now, I visited 2 projects when I was in Thailand. I went for 6 weeks over one summer. And with one of the projects, we went to rural Thailand. And in fact, one night I stayed, possibly even in this very house, but in a house just like it, on a farm in rural Thailand. Now, there was no electricity, and you can see that their houses are up on stilts, and quite often they'll keep their animals underneath. And it's a traditional way of building the farmhouses. We saw things like this, chili peppers drying on the roofs of the buildings because they like to have very spicy food. And often as we'd go about, we'd buy our food from street vendors like this lady here. Now, we spent some of the time in Bangkok, the big capital city as well. Here's a street vendor in Bangkok making something delicious. And they had lots of night markets. And at this one, they're actually selling something that may look delicious on this photograph. It's actually fried insects, which are considered really tasty there, but we tried them and we thought we'd stick to sweets. Now, can you see this man of his children? He's busy making some rather beautiful decorations out of jasmine flowers. Oops, I've lost that picture. Where did that one go? Oh, it stuck to the back. One second. Here you can see he's made lots of jasmine flower bracelets. And we had a special visitor to our house one day when we were in the countryside, and it was this elephant with vegetables on his back. We met lots of children while we were there. Here are some children wearing quite traditional Thai clothing. They've got special woven fabric for dresses, and they're holding up some baskets they've woven, I think. Here's a girl doing some traditional Thai dancing. And in the centre of Bangkok, we saw one of the very big and famous Buddhist temples, because most of the people in Thailand practice the Buddhist religion. They also have a very strong belief, often, in the spirit world, and outside their houses they'll have little tables where they'll leave offerings to the spirits to try and stop bad spirits from disturbing their houses. And actually, there were lots and lots of processions in the streets where monks would come by and people would be giving offerings. Sometimes it felt quite a heavy place to be because it felt like there was some fear around what people believed, that they believed that there were these bad spirits that were all around them. And we were grateful to know Jesus when we were in that place. There are about 1% of the population who are Thai Christian, and we met some of them, including these lovely people who are being baptized in the sea. There are some people here just doing some sea kayaking, I think, but here these people dressed in white are going in pairs to be baptized at the beach. And here they are coming out the water and being given flowers by members of their church to congratulate them on their baptism. But in particular, I wanted to tell you about a really, really special place that I went and volunteered in, which was a children's home in central Bangkok. And at that children's home, there were a lot of children who had disabilities and weren't able to use their bodies as easily as you and I. And rather than being able to stay with their families, a lot of these children had been left at the children's home because their families didn't have the resources, didn't have the help that they could give them. So the children were just growing up there. And the organisation that we worked with, What's True with There, was set up by Christians just to show love and to tell these children about Jesus and to help them in any way they could by going in to make their lives more interesting in the children's home. And although we did spend some time with very young children and playing with them and helping them with things they needed, we also spent some time with some young adults who were probably similar in age to us, only a little bit younger. And a lot of these young adults had cerebral palsy, which meant that they weren't able to walk because they hadn't had a lot of medical treatment when they were young. And they weren't able to use wheelchairs because their bodies wouldn't fit into the wheelchairs. So they mainly got about using their limbs, their arms and their legs on the ground. Now this is the day centre, and some of the volunteers and staff that work there that we met these young men in. And here are a couple of pictures of the day I spent in their day centre doing arts and crafts. This young man is called Pitaya, and as you can see there's some drawing here. He was doing drawing using his mouth, holding the pencil in his mouth. And here with these young men, I'm holding up a jar that they're decorating. So he's holding out his paintbrush here with the glue on it, but he doesn't have the mobility to hold the jar as well, so I'm holding it out for him. But the reason I wanted to tell you about these young men was because of what they taught me. And the ones that came and met us that day were Christians. They'd learnt about Jesus and they loved to sing about him. They were full of happiness when they sang about Jesus. And although we couldn't speak Thai very much, and they couldn't speak English, we could tell that their joy was infectious. It made us happy to be with them. And after we'd spent that time together, getting to know them a little bit, we went back into the room where they all had a meal together. And we were joined by some of the other young people that lived in that place. And it was obvious to us that those young people that were full of the love of Jesus were really trying to care for the others that were weaker than them, so that when the food was put out, all in bowls on the floor, because they couldn't sit at the tables because of the disabilities that they had, the young men that we'd been with were really careful to hold back stronger, quicker boys, so that those who weren't so able to get to the food had a chance to get there and get their place and get their food. And they helped everybody to get settled. And it was quite an extraordinary thing to watch and to see that they really wanted to be a loving community. It just became really apparent. And it made me think about what it means to be a Christian in all different circumstances, because these young men really just lived between about 3 rooms. So they went to the day centre, and they went into the room where they ate, and they went into the room where they slept. And really, they didn't see much of the wider world at all. And yet, within them, they clearly had this deep joy, even though they had very little material things in their lives, very few possessions. And it made me think about, well, what do I give off? Do I often complain about my life, or do I seem like I'm content and happy in the Lord Jesus? And they weren't working it up, they weren't putting on an act because we were there. They just were happy, and it was great to spend time with them. Now Jesus prays a prayer in the book of John it's written about in the period before Holy Week, as part of Holy Week, before his death by crucifixion. He prays this prayer for his disciples, but he also prays it for the people that are going to learn about him from his disciples once he's gone. So about you and I, and about Christians throughout the ages. And on Sunday at Family Communion, Sharon's going to be talking about this prayer. It's a really special prayer. And in it, Jesus explains how he is one with the Father, how he and God are one, and how the disciples can be one with God also. And all those who believe in his name, who come afterwards, can be one, can be part of God because of what Jesus is doing. And the way he puts it when he prays for those who don't yet know him is this: I ask also for those who will believe in me through their word, through the word of the disciples, that they may be one, just as you, Father God, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. So Jesus here is talking about how we as Christians look to those about us, because we have God within us, because we are at one with God and with Jesus. So you can think about that verse, and we'll hear a bit more from Sharon about it and do a bit more about it at church if you can come this Sunday. But I wanted to leave you with a little craft to remember my stories about Thailand, and I wondered whether you could rise to the jam jar challenge. So in this photo I showed you, this young man is making a pen holder out of a jam jar. He's covered it with paper, he's gluing onto it. I'm sure you've done similar things before. In fact, I've got an old messy one that Nat made a long, long time ago, and it started to fall a bit to pieces. There, it's covered with old bits of tissue paper. I think it looked a bit more splendid when we first made it. So Nat and Ben are going to make some new ones for Sunday and bring them along with a few pens in for what we're going to be doing at church. A few colouring pens or pencils. So if you want to take up the challenge, find yourself a jam jar, find yourself some coloured paper. See, perhaps you might even want to put the Thai flag on it, or the Japanese flag from last week, or some flags from the world, or decorate it in any way you like. Bring it in with some pens, and we'll carry on from there on Sunday. Thanks, Sunday Club. See you soon. Bye.